online with Amr The Internet Guy. Stream it today on your favorite podcast platforms. This podcast focuses on entrepreneurs and business owners, helping them become more successful in conducting their business on the web without being stuck with technology, getting a headache, pulling their hairs out, or buying expensive software.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Online. Has it ever occurred to you what makes businesses sell and others don't? Like, I do understand when you start a new business, you're usually not thinking about selling it. You're starting it because you like doing something specific and you're good at it and you want to make a business out of it and it helps other people. But believe it or not, many entrepreneurs have become serial entrepreneurs in a way that they start a business, they grow it, it becomes a big and a good business that's making profit and helping a lot of people. Then somebody else offers them to buy it off their hands, and many of them do sell the business. Then once it's sold, they think about the next challenge or the next venture, and they just go through it again and again. So I'm not saying you should start your business with the intention of selling it, but what I'm saying is when you start a business, you need to understand how your business will be valued in the eyes of others. Could be the public, the community you're working with, or venture capitalists, or if you're planning to go on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, or if you need to get a loan from the bank and things like that. So there are bits and pieces of your business that you need to be aware of that will control or influence how this business is valued or will be valued in the near future. So in order to understand and navigate this whole world, I spoke to an expert in selling your business and somebody who can help every entrepreneur think about the right stuff and also how to get the best value if you're actually in the process of selling your business. So without further ado, let's meet Marvin. Hey Marvin, how's it going?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk a little bit about business and how to optimize the value of a business when you get ready to step away and sell the business.
Perfect. So would you mind telling our audience where you are and what you do? I'm sure you do more than one thing.
I do. I had a business years ago and spent quite a bit of time building it up, like most entrepreneurs do that get into business. You get into the trenches and you putting out fires and growing and scaling your business on a day-to-day basis. And what I was really focused on was optimizing my revenue and pulling as much money to the bottom line as I could. And from there, eventually I decided that it was time to get an exit and step away from the business. And in my particular situation, I had brought in some outside investors. And whenever you do that, those investors have a timeline on where they want to return on their investment. And so that's one of the things that I didn't really quite, I understood it intellectually, but you hear one thing intellectually and a few years later when that intellectual thought process and understanding starts to come to reality and they start talking in board meetings and stuff, they start saying, okay, we need to start planning to, monetize our business here and sell it. I wasn't really ready to sell, but I had agreed to it when I took the money. You kind of sign on. And I've often said to entrepreneurs that I work with, that are thinking about selling their business, is that when you take the money, you have to understand the terms and be able and willing to abide by those terms. And so for my situation, it was a profitable exit. And after spending a lot of time, working hard and with the pedal to the metal, so to speak, and putting in long days and 7 days a week sometimes. When you step away and you aren't doing that every day, life in the slow lane gets kind of boring. And that was what happened to me. And I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time. So I'm just going to do a podcast because I kind of reasoned that,
That's good. Yeah.
there's a lot of other people out there like me that haven't gone through an exit. Entrepreneurs become really good at what they do because they do it every day and they continue to hone those skills and the ability to execute. But when it comes to selling or stepping away from your business, you maybe only get once or twice, maybe 3 times in your whole career, unless you're a serial entrepreneur. And you don't do it all the time. So you don't get really good at it.
Yes.
And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And that was kind of the situation I was in. If I'd have been a little bit more dialed in, I probably could have done better. So I started a podcast on my own, and I decided I would talk to the deal makers, the mergers and acquisitions specialists, the investment bankers, business brokers, CPAs, wealth managers, people that are involved in the kind of the transaction flow of making a deal happen for entrepreneurs to exit their business. And they bring to the podcast stories, transactions they've been involved in. They bring 2 good stories where the exit went really well, and in some cases, maybe better than well. And a couple of stories that went sideways, maybe had its challenges and problems, maybe got sold, maybe didn't. And why? What are the takeaways from that? And it's just been phenomenal, fantastic. If I had had a podcast like this before I, sold my last business, I would have done better for myself. I know that. So it's just been a great journey.
This brings so many questions that are jumping up and down now in my brain. The first one, is a simple one. What was your business? The one you sold?
Yeah, I was in the logistics business.
You exited at the right time.
Yeah. Well, it was a few years ago, so it wasn't in the current environment here. But I had locations around the country, and it was commercial and had kind of retail presence too. And it was a lot of moving parts, and it was a great ride. And as I said, if I had had my druthers, I would probably still be in the business today. But, I brought in outside capital to be able to grow and scale the business. And we did. We tremendously expanded the footprint of the business and quadrupled revenues and all that good stuff. And, people that make an investment want a return, and they don't want to wait forever. And sometimes entrepreneurs want to die in the chair, they just
something that is so interesting. Why would someone want to sell their business?
A lot of reasons. If I were to put it into categories, I would say that there are the planned events. People think about retiring or going on to the next thing. Some people just have a personality that they like to build a business. They don't necessarily like to run one. Once they get it to a certain level, it becomes routine and redundant and boring, predictable. And entrepreneurs a lot of times have a personality that they just like the thrill of starting from nothing and growing and building. But once it gets built, they want to move on to the next thing. So that's one reason. And retirement, obviously, there's a lot of baby boomers out there that may be listening to your podcast that, the time is coming. You're not going to live forever. Most people aren't anyway. And so there comes a time when you need to pass it on to somebody in the business, maybe an employee or management team or someone that or you're going to sell it to a third party, someone you don't know. And that's an entirely different process than selling it to someone that
So I see both ends. I see entrepreneurs, especially if it's a small business, not as large as a logistics company with branches all over the States. But I see the small, someone with a shop somewhere in a local town and who get scared if you get them to think about selling their business. It's not about how much money or what's the current value, that what can they get for it, but it's the fact that them being out of whatever they built scares them. And on the other end of the spectrum, I see people who are, the typical technology entrepreneurs who build an app or a piece of software, and their goal is to get acquired by a larger company or to sell it to a group of investors and exit and go make another app. So I think some have the mindset of like serial entrepreneur, or let's build it, sell it, build the next thing, sell it, and so on. And that's their adrenaline. And others think, oh my God, no, I can't, like, there's nothing else I can do. If I sell my business, like, I don't know, like it's scary. So in your experience, it didn't look like you're planning to sell your business because you're retiring. It sounded from what you just mentioned that it was a deal when you took on the investment, that at some point, when probably when you reach a certain size of the company, you had to sell.
Right. And I think, you touched on a very pertinent point in that in the tech world, there's a lot of capital out there to invest in very scalable businesses. You talk about apps and, SaaS programs or platforms that are built. Those investors, those venture capitalists or angel investors that get involved in those type of businesses, they generally are the people you're talking to are the partners of those funds, and they are the front men. They are the people that bring investors into their fund. And that fund has a specific objective and a specific timeline for deal flow and for deal maturity. And it may be a 10-year fund, it may be a 7 or 12-year fund, but it generally, when the prospectus is created and the general partners, they go out and talk to their investors and institutions and individual investors that invest. Those investors are buying into the management of that fund as well as the investment terms. You're going to invest in a certain type of company. You're going to invest for, bringing those companies public or being acquired or merged into another company. And the investors are looking for those partners that they invested with to execute on that business model and plan. And so when you take money from those, if you're an app developer or a software developer and you have a great idea and you pitch it to those, those VCs or those angel investors, and they invest in you, they're investing because they want a monetization event at some point in time. They don't want to be in this investment for 20, 30 years. They want to be able to monetize it, make a great return, and then go back to their investors and say, look how much money we made you. We have another fund, and we want you to roll this money into the next fund, or we want you to invest more money in that fund because we're such great investors and we know how to pick companies. And so they have a real vested interest in making sure they find the right companies, the right concept, the right management team, and that they are able to monetize that return, because other than that, it's just paper profits. It can go up or down and you don't recognize anything. So you really have to have, real exits that generate a return so that can go into the next prospectus.
So would you say for every entrepreneur, no matter what they do, it's a good thing to plan your exit when you're planning your entry?
Well, you talk again, I'll go back to your example of tech entrepreneurs. I mean, they start with the end in mind. They want to be acquired. They want to merge. They want to sell. They are looking toward, some type of event where they can recognize a financial return and profit on all their hard work. More often than not, though, traditional investors that are non-tech oriented, that may be in more traditional type of businesses, don't often think about the exit. They spend a lot of time thinking about how to get into business and researching competition and the market size and the type of products they'll offer. And they do all this, research, but they don't spend 10 minutes thinking about how they're going to get out of the business. They just think that someday they'll magically decide to sell and they'll be a line of people waiting to write them
Yeah,
checks.
yeah.
And that generally isn't the
It's
case.
not the case. Yes. I mean, a friend of mine was a prominent web designer, turned now to web designers coach and trainer, and he's got courses online, and he sold his web design agency. And for him, this happened naturally. It wasn't planned. But now when he talks about it, he's telling everyone, look, when you build your business, so if you're building a web design business or a web design agency, you have to plan to sell it at some point, even if you're not going to end up selling it. So, but there are steps that you should take. There are things that you should do in mind. For example, do not become the brand. It has to function without you. So, it's not on your name, and it's not, Amr's web design, it's something else. so that when you sell it, the brand name continues. It's not, you don't get to the nitty gritty and try to deliver every project yourself. You have to hire a team so that you can sell the agency, and whoever comes to run it, it doesn't even have to be a web designer, because the team does everything. And that was like an eye opener for, because in most cases, this is like being in trades. It's like being a plumber or an accountant or a vet, dentist. But you're still in tech somehow, but you're not an app. So you're kind of not investable. However, what people will buy would be two things: the brand name and the clients. Because, we do have maintenance, like annual and monthly maintenance plans that people subscribe to. So you build their website, and they're with you on a plan to update and, take care of their security and stuff like that. So whoever is buying is actually buying some recurring income from point one, existing clients who are loyal. And obviously they're looking into not just buying something that's already working, but they're looking at buying something that they can grow more with their own ideas, maybe with their own teams and so on. You told me something that was very interesting, that I don't know, I can't remember your exact words when you emailed me the other day, but my understanding was that there are things that you need to be aware of in order to get the best. I don't know if you didn't say the best deal or the best offer, but I think you said something in order not to lose when you're selling your business. Is that right? Did I put it right?
Well, yeah, there are certainly things that are like in any type of, if you use a sports metaphor for those folks out there, since we're in the football season here, a coach will do certain types of things to motivate his team. They'll have practice. They have a method they go through to prepare for the opponent, and they have this process in place. And they play the game on Sunday, then Monday they get together, and every day is something else. And finally it's Saturday, and the day before the game they have this process in place, all geared because of experience to be at their peak performance when it comes time to play the next team. And using that overused sports metaphor, it's not a whole lot different running a business. A business has seasons. There's the startup season, where you're scrambling and learning as you go, and then you start to scale your business, and it takes different skills to scale your business. And then you sort of get to maturity where, as you said, you start hiring and replacing yourself. So the business just isn't you, it's a team. You brand it appropriately. Your friend that, sold his web design business and consults with others now to, not make it Joe Smith's web design business tied to him as a personality, but to create a brand that's enduring. That is essential. And then, you have to know what you're making, and, have to have financial metrics, and you have to know the type of revenue you mentioned, renewables, subscription type of revenue. That is a different revenue and is valued differently in the marketplace than one-off revenue. And so it's these things that some of which of you have mentioned, that is a part of this process to create value in a business. And for those that follow a process, and it's not rocket science necessarily, but most entrepreneurs are the type of people that focus on the excitement of building, the excitement of starting, the excitement of just execution. That's what gets them up in the morning. That's what gets their juices going. Systematizing the business and, creating it, position it to be able to pass it off to the next owner, doesn't get them excited. It's more,
It gets them scared.
it's not what, it's not kind of what their personality is all about. But for those that do, like your friend that sold his web business, sometimes it just happens.
Yes.
And
it was not
get
planned.
lucky.
Yeah.
You get lucky. However, data and statistics, if you look at all businesses out there that sell, the data and statistics is that 8 out of 10, more than 8 out of 10 businesses that are listed every year for sale do not find a buyer. That's the hard, cold facts. And if that's the facts, then you have to ask yourself the question, where do I want to be? Do I want to be in the 80% or do I want to be in the 20%? And out of that 20%, there is the top 10% of that 20% that get more for their business than they thought it was worth. And that may somewhat be timing and being in the right place at the right time, but more often than not, it's because they've done the right things to make their business appealing and attractive to a buyer. And so just to, I often tell entrepreneurs, and I'm talking with people that are really good at what they do. I said, think about your business as a buyer. If you were buying your business, would you pay what you're going to be asking for your business? Would you write that check? And a lot of times they kind of shuffle their feet or look down at their desk and say, I don't know if I would or not, but they're willing to ask that.
Yeah.
But would they be able to buy a business like yours and pay that much? Because they know where all the bodies are buried and they know what the problems are. And a buyer is going to try to uncover and figure out why you're selling.
Indeed.
What aren't you telling them? And so they have this big, long list of due diligence checklist.
What are you not telling them?
Well, that's true, and depending on the type of buyer that you're selling to, some people are going to just step in and do the same thing you're doing. If you are kind of an operator type of business, you are the business, then you're looking for someone that fits that role. Someone that will roll up their sleeves and do what you do on a day-to-day basis.
That's the hardest thing, Marvin. That's like, and that's probably why some of the businesses aren't sellable, because it's really hard to find someone who's got the exact same passion as you. So I would believe that from the beginning, from the beginning, you have to plan your disinvolvement, like gradually. So,
you don't do it overnight.
Yeah. You said something very interesting, because we talk about it. We hear about it in coaching and, YouTube videos and all these free things out there, which is replacing yourself. But the problem is many people think that just by hiring, like my example, I'm a web designer by trade, and I have other web designers working with me, right? But it's not that they cannot run the business end to end, but when I hire them so that I can give them projects to do. I never hired anyone with the thought process that why can't they run the full thing? And, they become responsible for customer communications and fulfillment. And it's not just delivering the websites. And many people think that just by hiring a few people, they're replacing themselves, but you're not. You're one or maybe more than one of your hires together as a team should be able to do every single task that you do, not just the product delivery related part.
Well, I agree totally. I think what you've said is sort of the essence of creating value. If you are the person that has to be there every day, then you have a very limited pool of buyers.
Yeah.
And you're looking for, maybe it's an over exaggeration to say a needle in a haystack, but you're looking for a specific type of person. And depending on the geographical area or the scope, whether if you're an internet-based business, it doesn't make any difference where you live, or if you're a business that is tied to some sort of physical location, you may have a relatively narrow pool of buyers. And just the simple fact of doing what you are doing, like you described it, you bring on people that can do web design, you bring on people that are, handle the financial side of the business, you bring on people that are good at customer service and client acquisition, and you create this little team, you don't have to be there every day.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole new world of buyers out there that are interested in your business, because they're not buying you, they're buying what you've created. And they know that you don't have to be there necessarily. And so there's a lot more people out there in that pool of buyers than there is in the first one we talked about that has a specific skill set that you're trying to replace yourself. And so that's where real value is created. And it sounds like your friend who sold his a web design business, he had created that, and somebody else was willing to buy that customer list and what he had created and the systems and processes and everything else. And they wrote him a check, and hopefully it was a big check.
Yeah. I mean, I know both of them. I worked with both because I worked with the agency, right? So I worked with the past owner. We're still friends. We still do things together. And I'm one of his students as well. And I worked with the new owner. So I can see it's really interesting, because you can see, what the person bought into and what they're doing with it. And you can see that it's working because it was laid out correctly. And the fun part is that now when the person who exited is teaching how he did it, he didn't plan on doing it. It just happened. Like it just happened. This is how he grew his business. And it just happened that he reached a point when he thought, you know what, I want to exit and I want to focus on coaching and training others now so that they can be as successful as I was. And this is brilliant. One of the things that, we were, during this conversation so far, one of the things that we were discussing, just an example that I've seen, which is funny. I've worked with a CEO who's an excellent salesperson. Like in all my professional life, I haven't seen anybody better in sales than this guy, right? And he's still there and he's still going strong and he's still growing his business. But the biggest problem is when he hires salespeople, they can't compete with him. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation, because they have targets, but this guy's so good and he doesn't want to let go. So every other sales manager or sales director, after a few months in the company, they feel a little bit threatened because like they're competing with their CEO. So, what can be done in a situation like that?
Well, that's the expert's paradox, because the entrepreneur / expert is so good at what he does is that it's very tough to fill the shoes. But that is a limiting factor on value creation. So put yourself in the buyer's situation right now. You're going to buy this company, and the real value of the company is tied up in the expertise and the ability to execute on sales that the CEO has. And so it's tied to that individual. So what kind of check are they going to write? Well, probably not a very big one. They'd be buying the underlying assets without him there, and there may not be a lot of value there because the value is tied up in him. So if, the proper thing for him to do is to realize that he is Michael Jordan of his business, but he needs to create the Chicago Bulls.
Not
you
the
have
Jordan.
a star, you have a key player, but you got to create the team. You got to look for the Scottie Piffens, the backup players that support the main guy. And then you have to figure out a way to create as much revenue that you yourself generate so that there is value without you there. And when you have the dilemma of the entrepreneur / expert dilemma, that is a conscious effort to be able to overcome that. If you don't overcome it, you are capping the value of your business, and you'll never fully optimize that value and the ability to exit rich. You will probably be able to exit, and people will buy the company you've created, but what they will pay for that company is a low multiple versus an astronomically high multiple, because you've created the revenue engine that can continue to churn out customers and revenue without you. The key is to be able to, replace yourself.
Would it work if a
That's the bottom
buyer
line.
would it work if a buyer buys the business and gives you, let's say, a couple of years to transfer this expertise? Or, I mean, ideally, you should have transferred the expertise first before attempting to sell the business. But if that didn't happen and you get an opportunity to sell while you're not ready, is there something there to negotiate with the buyers to say like, hey, you know what, I'm happy to stay for a year or two to fully...
Well, yeah. Put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. How would you, as a buyer, how would you negotiate? If the main revenue generator is the entrepreneur, we'll call him Jim.
Yeah.
If Jim is the main revenue generator and you're buying his business, and you know that he is the source of most new business or keeping existing customers happy, then you're going to tie the sale to Jim. And you're going to tell Jim, okay, Jim, and this is how I would, if I were the buyer, this is what I'd be talking to Jim about. Okay, Jim, we're going to pay you $1 million for your business. However, we're only going to give you $500,000 in cash. Okay. And we're going to have an earnout for the next 3 years. We'll say 5 years for illustration purposes. And you're going to get $100,000 a year if you hit these sales targets. If you hit these sales targets, we're going to write you a check for $100,000 a year. Now, Jim, you said you're really good at sales, so you shouldn't have a problem agreeing to this because you've been doing it for the past 5 years. Why wouldn't you do it for the next 5 years? And we'll pay you. And a sophisticated buyer will, even because they do this all the time, and Jim is the first time he's ever sold his company. He doesn't know the ins and outs of selling his company. A sophisticated buyer will say, okay, you need to, generate these sales targets over the next 5 years. And if you hit these sales targets over the next 5 years, you're going to get $100,000. So you get your $1 million. Okay. And so you should be happy, Jim. You asked for $1 million. We're giving you $1 million, giving you exactly what you're asking. Just the timing is different. Then they say, okay, because I'm a sophisticated buyer. Well, Jim is used to being the boss, and he's using to have a $50,000 a year budget to support his sales efforts. And so the new owner comes in and says, well, we want to optimize our profits because that's what we buy this business. And so we're only going to allocate $20,000 a year to support sales efforts from Jim. Well, Jim made the assumption that he would have that $50,000. He's not sophisticated enough to guarantee that that money would be there. And so now he's trying to hit these sales targets with a fraction of the sales but marketing budget, and he misses those targets, so he doesn't get his $100,000. And he's saying, well, this is hogwash, I'm going, I'm going to have to work harder, I guess. And the next year they cut it to $10,000 because their strategy all along was they didn't want to pay that $500,000. They just wanted to be able to maximize their investment on the existing $500,000 investment. And they have their internal metrics that they measure, and they may be doing very well on their $500,000 investment. And Jim just squandered 50% of his value away because he was not really knew how the game was played. So for Jim, the best thing for him to do is to say, I'm going to create a system that doesn't require me to be there. And when I sell, I'm going to get $1 million cash, and I'm going to walk away, and I don't have to be there. Now I may stay 3 months, 6 months to help with
Yeah,
the
just
transition,
training. Yeah.
but I'm not going to be around for an earnout for 1, 2, 3, 5 years.
Yeah, I think that would be too much as well, because if you used to be the big shot who's calling all the shots there, and then suddenly now you're like a high-ranking employee, but it's not your decision. And the more you stay,
you don't own your company anymore.
yeah, and the more you stay, actually, the worse it is for you. So it's better to just exit quick.
Now, you may think that this is an unusual set of circumstances, but I can tell you from experience in interviewing the hundreds of people I have on my podcast and the stories that are told, this is very, very common. This is a key strategy for people that acquire companies, especially funds, private equity that acquires companies. They're very skilled at crafting deals that sometimes are almost impossible to meet the targets.
Yeah.
You got to be very careful.
And they make it very appealing to the person selling the business. A lot of people, that's the thing. That's what we're saying. A lot of people, if they didn't plan for this ever, and then didn't give it a lot of thought, they wouldn't know. So for them, it's new. It's somebody proposing and like, hey, I don't have to leave the business that I built and that I love, and the team that I've been working with day in and day out, and we have a great family-like relationship. And it may seem like a good idea to stay 5 extra years with them after you've taken like the $500,000, Jim, right? But what you don't know that you're actually losing $500,000, not taking $500,000.
That's right. You understand what the situation is in this type of situations, this opportunity cost, and it's all in the planning. The ideal situation for Jim and for other entrepreneurs out there is to create something that you can get all or 90, 95% of your money out of the business when you sell it. And the reason you can do that is because you've created something that can make money without you there.
Do you test it, like go on holiday for a month or something like that and see if it's still running and making the money?
That may seem, you say that in jest, but that's exactly how you do it. Most entrepreneurs that start a business, I mean, when I
no one thinks of it. Yeah, you just
when I
live the day.
Yeah, I got involved in my first business. I was there 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. And it comes to a point where you're going to burn out, or the wheels are going to come off the bus or whatever, and you have to start that migration process. And it is exactly as you said. You start hiring people, and you will probably screw it up, hire the wrong person
the first few times. Yes, yeah.
You're not going to get it right the first few times. You got to be persistent, and you have to be patient, and then you're going to find that person that can be dependable, can get most of the things done. Probably not as good as you are, but you can fill in the gaps. But then you do take a long weekend, then you do take a week, and then you do take 2 weeks, and then you do take a month, and you see how it goes. And those that get really good at it, and the key is hiring the right people. If you do hire the right people, sometimes you get in the way. People are actually better at it than you are.
Yeah. And if you're gonna sorry, go ahead.
You're the entrepreneur that has all the great ideas. They may not be the idea people, but they can execute better than you can.
I was going to say, if you're going to judge them based on how close they are to being you're not doing yourself a favor. So it shouldn't be, this is how I do it. This is how the other person does it, and how close or far away from how I do it they are. It should be, what's the target? Did they get to it? Like, what do I want to do? What do I want to get out of this person's work? For example, if it's let's say sales, because that's the easiest thing. Okay, the target is X amount of money, or X number of projects, right? If they get it, it doesn't matter how they got it. Like, I don't care. You shouldn't care. It shouldn't be like, oh, but if I was there, I would get more. It doesn't matter. The target is 10. They got you the 10. You can't say after that, oh, but if I did it, I would have gotten 15, not just 10. Well, it doesn't matter. They're not you.
Well, we come back to the example we were talking about, the super salesman,
Yeah.
the CEO that no one could match him and he intimidated everybody else in the company. The proper thing to do is exactly what you said. Is set targets and sales goals, and you could have done better, but that's not your goal. Your goal is to create something that can generate income and revenue and profits without you being there. Let me tell you, the minute you are able to do that, you've created value that goes beyond you as an individual. And the key here is the pool of buyers that will be interested in your business is 10x. It is 10 times more people will be interested in that type of business than you being the key component of the business. And then if you're really smart and you really take time and plan, you start looking for a strategic buyer. You start looking for someone that will buy your business because what you're offering is important to them, and they can sell your products and services to their customer base. And so they will pay more than your business is worth because it is worth more to them than it is worth to you.
It becomes an important component of what they do.
Right.
So Marvin,
Exactly
where would
right.
people go to get help with, educating themselves about this?
Well, I think the thing that I would recommend that most people do is start slow, and probably one of the best ways to do that, it would have been for me, if I had a podcast like the one that I have, this Business Exit Stories, which is a compilation of good stories and bad stories told by the deal makers, the mergers and acquisition people, the attorneys, the wealth managers, business brokers, all of those people that help make deals possible for entrepreneurs selling their business. They bring good and bad stories and the key takeaways of why the deal went well or why it didn't. There are 4 takeaways, 4 stories on each episode. And if I had listened to 100 of those episodes, I would have been much more dialed in when I got ready to sell my last business. And so I would suggest that just take it easy. I know you're busy running your business and you're working long hours and you're working hard, sometimes 6 and 7, 8 days a week. Sometimes it seems like just take that, 45 minutes or so a week and listen to 4 stories and, being able to understand the takeaways and how it relates to you. And if you can do that, that'll put you miles ahead down the road. And then I also have a kind of a free takeaway, a downloadable document that talks about how you can double the amount of money that you put in your pocket when you sell your business. And you just go to Business Exit Stories /report 2, that's numeral 2, report 2 at that podcast address, the website podcast address, and download it and take a read on that and listen to a few episodes. And that will get you in the frame of mind of just thinking about someday you're probably going to sell your business and what do you need to do between now and then. And I think, and you can get the podcast wherever you get your podcast, just like your podcast. Just go to Apple or wherever and type in Business Exit Stories and subscribe, and you'll start that long process, because I know you're busy. I know you don't have a lot of time because you're running your business, but positioning an exit is about a thought process more than it is about doing something today.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marvin. Guys, I'm going to put the links below when this episode is published so that you can click and get there really quickly. Thanks,
All right.
Marvin.
Well, this has been great. Phenomenal being able to talk to you and to share some ideas with your audience there that I know that will benefit them down the road.
Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot.
Hey guys, and before we go away, I'm sure you know that one of the main things that people look at when evaluating your business is your website. So if you're not sure how your website looks to, the people outside your organization or how it performs, just head to humantalents.ca and take your complimentary website audit. There is no strings attached, and what you get is a quick video of me auditing your website and telling you what are the strengths and the points that are not so strong as well, and give you like an easy way to get everything fixed. You don't have to do it with me. In fact, you don't have to do it with anyone at all. They'll be easy to follow, and you can do it all yourself. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.